Is Dr. Huw Griffiths, and I'd like to introduce to you today what, in my opinion, is one of the most important words in the new curriculum for Wales then. Hopefully the PowerPoint will be coming up. And in my opinion, the most important word is Cynefin. Cynefin. And it's not Kevin, by the way, as somebody's told me in the past. It is actually Cynefin. It is the only Welsh word in the English version of the new curriculum. And in my opinion, it needs to be adopted by all our pupils here in Wales. We very often adopt words because they mean something, they resonate with us. For example, everybody in Wales understands the word cwtch. And cwtch to us means something more, it means something deeper. You know, it's more than a hug. It's 100 times more than a hug. Similarly then, we've adopted the word hiraeth. And hiraeth, very often when we use hiraeth, which is a long in for our country, for Wales, for our community, we add the word, oh, it can't be translated. We automatically say, oh, it can't be translated, it doesn't mean anything. You know, it's unique to us here in Wales. But we very often adopt other words. For example, the Little Book of Hug, Little Book of Like. And what these emphasize is the importance that words have. And it resonates with us, as I previously mentioned. It was very difficult to get the word Cynefin in the curriculum itself then. A lot of people said, and I remember people saying at the time, why should we have a Welsh word in the English document, in the English version of the curriculum? But I argued, no, it's going to be more than that. It means something to us far, far more. But as I was very fortunate to be one of the teachers involved in developing the new curriculum. And what's unique about a curriculum here, it's the first curriculum in the world, it's the only curriculum in the world that's been actually written by teachers. The vast majority of the curriculums are written by academics. And as we looked at curriculums, and we looked at, for example, on the slide here, the New Zealand curriculum, you could see the amount of Maori that were in the curriculum, the blue. I was fighting to get one word in our curriculum, and people were against it. But almost right at the end, before the draft version, I don't know if you remember, there was a draft version of the curriculum that was sent out, and people were to discuss it. And I said, okay, Huw, if you really want Cynefin in there, we'll put it into the draft version. If people don't like it, we'll take it out anyway. And it was on the last day before it was sent, the humanities curriculum, before it was sent out then. And he said, okay, but you have to write a definition. And I said, okay. I'm a historian, not a linguist. But what they didn't know was that I had a superpower. And my special superpower was my mobile phone. And I phoned a very close friend of mine, the poet, the Welsh language poet, Mererid Hopwood. And I said to Mererid, listen, we can get the word Cynefin in there if we can write the definition. And I'd love to say that both me and Mererid, me holding the phone, sat down and worked out the definition of Cynefin. What actually happened was that I held the phone with a pen in my hand, and Mererid came up with the definition. And it is word for word the definition that appears now within the curriculum itself. Well, it was published in the draft proposal. And as you can see from the slide, in the Hay Festival, at the Hay Festival, what actually happened, Kirsty Williams, the then Minister for Education, went to talk about the new curriculum at the Hay Festival. She had a half-hour slot, and she spoke for 20 minutes just on Cynefin. And every meeting I attended after that, all the civil servants and everybody thought Cynefin was the best thing ever. It was fantastic. It was a massive change in attitude and opinion towards Cynefin itself. But to truly understand Cynefin, what I want you to do is close your eyes. And I want you to go back in time. I want you to go back to that special place where you were born, maybe, or the community that you lived when you were in school. Think of the village, the town, the street where you lived on. Think of the special people that were there that maybe are no longer with us. Think of the friends in your class in primary school or in secondary school. And think of the time, that special time within your community, within your Cynefin. And as I read the words, I hope with your eyes closed, you're not with me anymore, that you're back in that, in your Cynefin. So hopefully everybody's got their eyes closed. If you've got your eyes closed, I'll start reading the definition as it appears in the curriculum. Cynefin. This is the place where we feel we belong, where the people and landscape around us are familiar and the sights and sounds are reassuringly recognisable. Though often translated as habitat, Cynefin is not just a place in a physical or geographical sense. It is a historic, cultural and social place which has shaped and continues to shape the community which inhabits it. And for me personally, and you can open your eyes now, hopefully, and you can rejoin us. This is the community I go back to. It's in the Upper Swansea Valley. It's a small village of Cwmturch. And this was painted by a friend, a very dear friend of mine, the artist, Mark Morris. And although I'd argue, of course, that he's painted me on the right-hand side, he's made me a little bit too chunky, in my opinion. Other people don't view it similarly. Next to me then is my father and my uncle. Unfortunately, I lost these really amazing characters during lockdown. And this is the village that I was brought out. On the left-hand side is the house where I spent my childhood. Behind me is the Miners' Welfare Hall. And behind the Welfare Hall then is the chapel where I attended. On the right-hand side of the Miners' Hall is the river where we swam as children. This was our swimming pool. And further up the street is the rugby club, a really stereotypical community here in Wales. This is the place where I feel I belong. This is my Cynefin. But there's also something more that you can't see in this picture. There's a spirit here. Mam. Unfortunately, Mam again passed away before this painting was done. And as I speak of Mam and I think of Mam, and this is Mam, she would have been really proud and chuffed that I chose this photo of her. This is the photo, I was actually 18, so it's a long time ago then. This is a photo of my mum in my brother's wedding. She loved this photo. And Mam, being Mam, of course, when I was out in the United States and I was a visiting scholar, was known as a visiting scholar in Harvard University. And I know this makes me sound a little bit boastful. I spent a lot of time doing my research, my PhD research out there then for a few months. I come out of this really badly, by the way, as I said, this story. I was living, as I said, out in the United States, and I sent a poster back. Underneath our doors every week would come, it was a pamphlet sort of poster outlining the guest speakers who'd appear in the university during that week to do presentations and so on. And during that special week was an amazing person, Nelson Mandela. This is the standard of people that were presenting at the university. Nelson Mandela, and I was very fortunate to be one of the 500 people that attended the meeting that saw Nelson Mandela speak. Also during the week was Chris Patten, I almost forgot his name, Chris Patten, the previous governor of Hong Kong, who spoke about his time out in Hong Kong. And if you looked at the poster, really, really small, minuscule writing right down the bottom with a whole list of other people was my name, Huw Griffiths, and I spoke to the Celtic Studies Department. As I said, I sent this back to Mam. And Mam, you know, being Mam, of course, showed everybody in the village and was very, very proud of that, that her son out in the United States. And as I came back from the United States, I asked Mam, where is the poster? And she turned to me and she said, well, I've thrown that. I said, what do you mean you've thrown it, Mam? Well, everybody's seen it. Everybody in the village has seen it. Everybody in the Cynefin, Cynefin has seen that. I wanted to boast to the world. I wanted to show everybody. But to Mam, as long as the Cynefin, the community had seen it, that was good enough. And that was the power that the Cynefin presented to my mother. It's also, in my opinion, then, with us pupils in school, there's a lot of things that divide pupils, be that race, be that gender, be that class. But Cynefin is one of the few things that unites all your pupils in your class because they come from the same community. They're all from that little special piece of Wales. And it joins them, unites them together, be that in primary school or in secondary school. It also provides them a confidence. To me, Cynefin is outward looking. It's looking at your feet, where you're from, but it's outward looking, and it gives them a confidence to look outwards at the world. It's an amazing idea, in my opinion. It also unites with what Johann von Goethe said. There are two things, right? He wrote this almost 200 years ago. There are two things children should get from their parents: roots and wings. Cynefin provides our young people here in Wales with that roots in order for them to fly, in order for them to achieve their goals in life. Also, in my opinion then, and I've done a lot of research, and as I've done research on various different issues as they've arisen then, I've looked, for example, at the work of Edmund Burke. Edmund Burke can be rightfully described as the father of politics, modern politics in Britain then. And this is some of the writing that he wrote as regards this. To be attached to the subdivision, the community, in my opinion, of Cynefin, that's what I view as the subdivision. To love the little platoon we belong to in society is the first principle, the germ of public affection. It is the first link in a series by which we proceed towards a love of our country and to mankind. Wow. This is where it begins. The love of country and the love of mankind. It begins with your subdivision, with your Cynefin. And we can see this clearly in the curriculum, I'd argue. We've been with Cynefin, Cymru, Wales, a'r byd, the world. One of my big heroes is a man named Meredydd Ifans. Meredydd Ifans, as you can see from the slide itself, he's a Welshman, a scholar, a philosopher, a teacher, an entertainer, a singer, a historian, a language campaigner, a television producer, and finally a friend. Meredydd Ifans was massive to me. And as a student, I remember studying in the National Library of Wales, and I'd go to the National Library of Wales, and next to me then I was researching, reading old newspaper copies, and next to me would be Mered, and I knew exactly who he was. And we'd start talking, because very often in the summer there would be not many people in the library, and we'd go for dinner together, and we'd sit down and he'd tell me some of these remarkable stories of his life when he was a Yale professor out in the United States. When also then he worked for the BBC and he met people like Morecambe and Wise and so on during his period as head of light entertainment in Cardiff. He was an amazing character. I very often found myself going to the National Library for dinner where I really didn't need to go there for my own research, just to meet Mered and spend a little time with him. Well, anyway, he passed away, and his biography came out, and I bought the biography and read it, and it was in Welsh then. And this was published after Cynefin had appeared in the curriculum and everything. And right at the end was a poem, his last poem. And sometimes in life, things really hit home and really brought a massive tear to my eye. And his final poem was simply called Cynefin. And it ends with the line, ble bynnag a hyd gyrraedd cread crwn, a fam Cynefin hefo mi miwn. Wherever I travel throughout the world, I'll take my Cynefin with me. And I think, it's such a powerful idea for our young people here in Wales, if they take their Cynefin with them, the roots, in order for them to fly. Cynefin, yes, it's great and it's powerful, and it's yes, it belongs to us. We own the word now. But it's not simply an idea here in Wales, As I've done research and as I looked at other countries, this is not Wales, unfortunately. This is the Hebrides in Scotland. And one of my favourite groups is the group called Runrig, who sing in Scots Gaelic. And one of their songs is called The Story. And it's really resonated with me as I hear these words. I'm still dreaming of the Hebrides, and I'm still leaning on the early years. And I can't help feeling it will always be the story of the life inside of me. Cynefin will always be the story of the life inside of me. And as we move along and as we get older, maybe we're always leaning on those early years, the value of that period that created us, who we are today then. Similarly then, I looked at Finland, and Finland, of course, is leading the world in education very often. And one of those people involved with that then was the Minister for Education, who wrote a great deal about the Finnish education system, was a man named Pasi Sahlberg. And these are his words. You can't understand who a person is unless you know where they came from. Our lives are lived forward but understood backwards. Cynefin gives us that opportunity to understand who we are as a people. I'd like to draw to a conclusion then by looking at another hero of mine, a lady named Christa McAuliffe. And what's amazing about Christa McAuliffe is there's nothing actually amazing about Christa McAuliffe. She was a high school teacher in the United States that taught science. And the only thing that makes her stand out is the fact that she won a competition. And she won a competition to fly on board the Spaceship Challenger. And if you're as old as me, you can remember what happened, unfortunately, to the Spaceship Challenger. The spaceship itself blew up, and all the astronauts, including Christa McAuliffe, were killed. But in an interview before boarding Challenger, she was asked by newspaper reporters how she felt about being, going into the future, this amazing opportunity that she had, to go when nobody had gone before as a teacher into the future. And she turned to them, and this really resonates with me then, the idea that I touch the future every single day I walk into my classroom, she said, because I teach. And that's the amazing opportunities that all you as teachers have. You have an opportunity to touch the future every single day you walk into that classroom. And in my opinion, and in the curriculum for Wales then, we need to ensure that Cynefin is an intrinsic part of the future of our learners here in Wales. Diolch yn fawr i chi gyd. Diolch.